Right now, we are dependent upon, the import. Mostly, it's about the import. Whether we talk about, we have missed three buses, whether we talk about, the in solar, whether we talk about the communications, or even the lithium ion batteries cells, in fact, I should say, because when I say batteries, so we are anyway assembling the cells imported from outside. Assembly is happening in our country. So in these three terms, we have already missed the bus by a long way. But still, because lithium ion cell, this industry is still at the commercialization stage, still not saturated fully, and we have beyond lithium also chemistries which are coming up. So we have this chance wherein we can rope in and get the maximum output. And this is not only going to serve the EVs, but also this grid storage part.
So very happy to see the fraternity join in. Welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to connect with everyone and our distinguished keynote speaker who is handpicked because of the thick input and the rich experience he brings in. Thank you also to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online mode as well. Now, for those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for business leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sector communities such as e-mobility, renewable energy, real estate, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinar series and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 12,000 plus like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Those leaders among you who are interested, please do join us. I will share the link to the app in the chat section, and we'll soon be sending out invitations to our new guests post today's discussion. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our today's keynote speaker and Blue Circle member, Mr. Randheer Singh. He's the Director of Electric Mobility at NITI Aayog and currently working to transform transport or mobility in India. He specializes in battery, which is a leading ACC program. He looks after the EV policy, leading state EV accelerator program, looks at EV standards, where he's the member of BIS committee on EV infrastructure standards, and also technical jury member for battery swapping standards. He also looks after the EV infrastructure, where he has released several reports, including the handbook, and working on several projects with industry and state governments. He also focuses on EV financing, where he's working on initiatives to remove the hurdles of high finance costs for EV manufacturing as well as adoption. And he looks at projects with World Bank and leading finance providers in the country. And for today's topic, Mr. Singh will be discussing battery swapping standards, policy, and advanced chemistry cell PLI scheme. I request Mr. Singh to please begin the session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gautam. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thanks, and thank you very much for having me here. Without putting out the too much context, I'll start the discussion. So today I'll be talking mostly about the battery storage and the battery swapping. When I say battery swapping, both battery swapping standards as well as the policy, I'll be talking about both the things. So why first battery storage parts? So the program, the PLI program, Advanced Chemistry Cell Program, this was basically designed to build the advanced battery cell capabilities in our country, and in terms of the scale, that is the gigafactories, because anything less than 5 to 6 gigawatt hour in terms of advanced cells is not going to give us the economies of scale. We did the analysis what is happening around the world, what is required. And this is the sunrise sector wherein we have to plan to actually lead the next revolution in industries. And the next industry, when I talk about that, it means the automotive. And the automotive, if I just leave the, the commercial side, mining side, which of course will need some hybrid solutions, maybe the hydrogen and others, but other solutions like two-wheeler, three-wheeler, buses, and the small commercial vehicles, they definitely need the solution which can be, put in instantaneous, and we need to transform this as fast as possible. We all of us know very well the 5 commitments which Indian government or the Prime Minister of India has made at the COP26. One of them is to become the net zero in 2070. One of them is to reduce the 1 billion metric tons of CO2 from 2022 as the base year. So all these things would only be possible, and of course the 50% of the the total power has to be generated from the non-fossil fuel based power sources. All of this would only be possible if we have the proper storage solutions. Otherwise, in the valley of death, when we talk about the power, that is the place wherein we are going to lose everything. And to make the optimum use, we need to have the proper storage solutions in our country. Right now, we are dependent upon the import. Mostly, it's about the import. Whether we talk about, we have missed 3 buses, whether we talk about in solar, whether we talk about the communications, or even the lithium ion batteries cells, in fact I should say, because when I say batteries, so we are anyway assembling the cells imported from outside. Assembly is happening in our country. So in these 3 terms, we have already missed the bus by a long way. But still, because lithium ion cell, this industry is still at the commercialization stage, still not saturated fully. And we have beyond lithium also chemistries which are coming up. So we have this chance wherein we can rope in and get the maximum output. And this is not only going to serve the EVs, but also this grid storage part. So consumer electronics, industries, grid storage, and EVs, all these sectors are going to be served by this program. It is 18,100 crore outlay for over the period of 5 years. Now, what is going to be the impact in terms of our import? So advanced battery cell import bill, it is going to save us from the 2 biggest things. One is the crude oil import, and the second is in terms of the money which goes out, the currency. So both the things would be saved when we reduce the imports. So without the program, the cumulative import bill between 22 to 2030 would be around 380,000 crore. But with 50 gigawatt hour capacity, this is the total capacity at disposal under this program, and incremental capacity that would be implemented till 2030. The total import bill that we analyzed could be reduced by approximately 190,000 crores. And if we transform this year on year, the average potential battery savings comes around 21,000 crores. So if you, in the chart, we have also shown the value capture over the period of time. So what we see is by 2030, since currently in terms of the supply chain at cell level, almost nothing exists. But then we have to set an aggressive targets. So that's why 2 different targets has been sent. I will be talking about that in the coming slides. So now, energy storage area, it has several developments recently. So if we want to move towards the total overall energy storage solutions, so prices of batteries falling because of the technological development. Recovery of precious metals has to happen because the lithium reserves as of now are not only limited, in fact, they will not be even sufficient to supply the vehicles, even at the vehicle level. Forget the grid storage part. Even at the current pace of the vehicles would not be supplied or supported completely by the current reserves. So we need to recycle these precious metals, which includes the lithium, cobalt, manganese, and others. Next is the development of the alternative materials in anode as well as in cathode chemistries. So dependence on one type of chemistry means dependence of one type of critical minerals. So we have to reduce this also by pouring into new technologies, new chemistries. This is also required to achieve the better efficiencies in terms of the number of cycles and the watt hour per kg. That means the density also. Reduce the size of the battery as well as reduce the cost. What has happened in the chip industry, the same has to be replicated here. Next is about the base technology for the deployment. So, the overall technology will not change, only the type of chemistries will change. The form factors may or may not change, but now depending upon the requirements, it will change. But the battery form factor, cell form factors can change, but the battery form factor has to be defined so that the usability of these batteries across vehicles, as well as the second use of these batteries, can be regulated, can be synced, can be planned. All those things can be done. Next is about the demand aggregation on the EV side. Now you have produced something, you have manufactured something. Who is the consumer? Whether the consumer is aware about this or not. And also because this technology is new, or every secondary market is not yet developed, the prices are very high, financing is not available. So you have to bring down the capital cost. And how it will be done? The thing which we have done in the FAME 2 remodeling. For the electric three-wheelers and the buses, we have done the demand aggregation. And for the electric three-wheelers, we have already seen the reduction of up to the tune of 18 to 26%. That means to the demand aggregation, you harmonize the product and bring down the overall cost because of the number of vehicles or the scale at which you are playing. Next is about the grid side interventions. So currently we don't have that many vehicles available, but once the number of vehicles, even in fact, I should say the density of the vehicle in particular area increases, definitely this is going to impact the distribution in that area. We need to be prepared from the grid side, from the DISCOM side at this stage itself. So another concept in this, which California has already implemented, is vehicle to grid. That means if so many vehicles are available, it also supplies power to the grid. It can support the power in term whenever the need is there. I would not touch upon the other parts because of the paucity of the time, but definitely through ACC, we have also touched upon one important thing. That means, of course, we say in this particular bid that minimum is 5 gigawatt hour. That means the minimum investment which a particular bidder has to do is to the tune of 6,000 to 7,000 crores, which is what the money is required to set up the advanced chemistry cell facility from the ground up. Now, in this particular bid, we encouraged people to form the joint venture so that even the small players whose turnover is not as high as we asked. We asked that anybody who is quoting more than 5 gigawatt hour, 1,500 crores is the net worth which is required. Now, anybody who is having more than 26% in this JV will be considered as the main contender. They can make it that particular guy as this is the one on whose name the bid has been submitted, and their credentials only we will be looking upon. And in fact, since the bid has already been submitted, so I'm not going to delve deep into this, but just wanted to convey the idea of why this has been done. So now what has happened to the ACC bid? What is the status? So ACC bid, which in which the total capacity at disposal was 50 gigawatt hour, it has been subscribed 2.6 times. We received the bids to around 128 gigawatt hour. This gives a very, very good signal. Signal in terms of the investment, signal in terms of the adaptation and adoption of the newer technology, as well as the developing the new mechanism, new system. Next is the number of bidders. It's not that 2 or 3 or 4 bidders are there. Total 10 bidders are there. The mechanism which we adopted in this is not the L1, but the quality cost based selection, QCBS mechanism. So, this also puts in faith in terms of the bidders that the technology is considered to be the paramount. In fact, we had the metrics, cycle life versus the watt hour per kg. On the basis of that metrics only, this technical evaluation is being done. And we have set 2 very strict timelines. In fact, milestones. One is within the 2 years of the letter of award, 25% of localization at cell level has to be achieved. And within 5 years of the letter of award, 60% of the localization again at the cell level has to be achieved. And so this is very strict condition looking at the current status of supply chain in terms of the advanced cells in our country. But of course, achievable. We have done several analysis, several discussions with the industry, and we have received the response also. So currently we are doing the technical evaluation, and soon the financial bids will also be opened. And next, about the battery swapping standards and policy. In terms of the battery swapping policy, we have held first pre-draft consultations on 18th of last month, and we have received a humongous registrations. Almost 500 registrations were there from OEMs, think tanks, battery OEMs, vehicle OEMs, NGOs, media persons, consultants, experts. Everybody registered. We have given enough chance to all. Of course, in a limited time, we cannot. It's not possible for everybody to speak, but definitely we have accepted the suggestions on mail, and around 50 plus people were also allowed to speak on. And we have received a very, very good suggestions, very, very good representation. Next step in the battery swapping policy is once we prepare the draft, we are going to again go back and to the industry, go back to the the OEMs and others to discuss the draft with them. Once we discuss the draft with them, it will be of course floated within the ministries and all to take the feedback. And one last time, we will also do discussion of this updated draft policy in cohorts, wherein 5 different cohorts we will form. And these cohorts will be asked, will be called for the discussions before releasing the final policy. And what is complementing this policy are the standards, battery swapping standards. So there are 4 different teams which has been formed by the BIS. And the DST is also leading this. First is about the general guidelines. Second is the connector system. Third is the communication protocol. And the 4th is the central management system, which will deal, the 4th part, which will deal with the interoperability. See, battery swapping without interoperability is not going to serve the purpose. We need to have the interoperability standards, but we need to touch the minimum specs so that the innovation is not hindered, but it facilitates the flexibility to the consumer, so that today, if they have the battery of one person, and tomorrow they want to switch the batteries of that particular person, they should have that flexibility that they can switch it without much hassle. Of course, in terms of the scheme and other things, we have to still define how this would be handled, because if somebody takes the battery of one particular OEM and after 15 days, 30 days or a month or so, he wants to switch, then how the money which is flowing from the scheme is going to be regulated. All those things we need to see in the due course of time, and it will be defined properly in the swapping policy, as well as during the standards, how the technicalities of this will be handled, both at the charging side, that is at swap station, and at the discharging side, that is at the vehicle side. I'll end with this. I hope I'm within the time. Thank you very much. Gautam, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'll just quickly jump into the Q&A section now. Before we land up in our Q&A section. We've already received a few questions. If I could just ask you those. I'll start with the first one from Mr. Arun Kumar, asking how does the swapping scheme take care of residual life of the battery and its performance issues such as degradation of batteries due to higher number of charge or recharge and depth of recharge?
So, battery swapping policy will touch upon all the parameters. As far as the battery recycling is concerned, battery management rules, the draft battery management rules were released last year by MOEFCC. And you will see soon these rules will come out. Battery swapping standards will have some references to how the final battery tracking, extended producer responsibility, and also the second use of this battery would be done. Those things will be touched upon in the battery swapping policy, because definitely without this circular economy, whatever we are going to release, this is not going to be sufficient for the country of our scale, wherein we don't have the raw materials. So we definitely need to thrust upon the recycling of this, and we will touch upon in the policy. Not even touch upon, in fact, I should say there are enough provisions which would be made within that. Does this answer your question?
I think it does. Thank you. I'll quickly move on to the next one. The question is, what kind of standardization in terms of charging protocol, charge rate, and connectors can we expect from the government in the upcoming guidelines? There's another question to this. Is the form factor also going to be accommodating to the older designs, which are China made, of battery operated vehicles?
So three things. One is the form factor at battery level, not at the cell level. Form factor at the battery level has to be standardized, because if you are not going to standardize the dimensions, how different batteries will fit into the same vehicle, how the different batteries can go into the same swap station, same type of swap stations. So interoperability can only be achieved if the dimensions are same. This is one. So that form factor, that is the dimensions, would be standardized. Second thing about the connector, you need to have the same connector at charging and the discharging point. Otherwise, again, the same question comes: how different batteries will fit in the same vehicle? So that is the place wherein we have to do the standardization. And the third thing is the communication protocol. If you fit some other battery, if you change that, how this is going to communicate with the swap station, that is the charging station, as well as with the vehicle. So these three things, that means the dimensions, the communication protocol, and the connector, would be standardized. Rest other things are not going to be touched. Those will be left open. So that's why with the minimum intervention, the standardization would be touched upon. Rest other things will not be touched upon. It is left open for the innovation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now I'll just quickly go to the Q&A section, which we have quite a few questions coming in. I'll start with Mr. Nirav Mehta. He's asking, what's the policy for battery swapping stations at home and retail shops? The current electricity law doesn't allow reselling of electricity, and that's a big hurdle.
See, currently for battery swapping stations as such, nothing exists. I'm not sure whether you are a consumer or you are a CPO or an OEM or an expert, but then this is just a reiteration from my end, because why we have to do this policy as well as the standards, because for the battery swapping as of now, there is no clarity. Even the rules which has been released by the MOP, it needs to define the battery swapping within that. Having said so, for the charging infrastructure, which is the swap station, for the charging infrastructure, MOP already defines at what rate the connection will be given, in how many days the connection will be given, where all the connection will be given. Those things are already there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next.
So I'll just move on to the next question. I love these two questions because they're kind of simple. One is asking, is battery swapping only being considered for 2 and 3 wheelers? And similarly, will swappable battery specs be same for 2 wheelers and 3 wheelers?
Yes, correct. Currently, the battery swapping would be considered for the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and going forward, we will do the battery swapping standards as well as the extend the policy for the buses also. Of course, in buses, not entire battery can be swapped, but it will go in the hybrid mode. Some part will be fixed, and some of the swappable ones, like the top up, can be done. So that is what the coverage would be in the short and the long term. Uh, as far as the same form factor, other things are considered. Initially, what I spoke about would be done for the two-wheelers. Whether the same will be replicated for the three-wheelers or not, that we still need to discuss with the experts within the committees and of course with the industry. So that part, definitely I would not say has been fixed, whether the same two-wheeler battery and the form factor would be done for the three-wheelers or not. But of course, the connector and the communication protocol will remain same.
Thank you. So I'll quickly jump to the next one. There's a question which wants to be addressed for your standardization point. He's asking, won't the size of battery create a big hurdle in interoperability? Size needs to be standardized as well there. So if you could just address that.
Yeah, that's what I said. Dimensions.
Correct.
It would be standardized. That's what I said.
Yeah. So Nikhil Bhatia has asked, as an energy first OEM in two and three-wheeler space, we are in development cycle of a lot of products on swappable battery. With uncertainty on dimensions, we have to put a stop on development cycle. If you could share your thoughts on that.
Uncertainty on dimensions. I didn't get this. With uncertainty on dimensions.
We have to put a stop on development cycle is what he's asking. Maybe if he could
no.
address this.
The thing is, there will be enough time which will be given. You have seen in the FAME that people has to comply with the FAME, and the phased manufacturing program was launched along with that. People has to comply with the phased manufacturing program, certain percentage of the localization to get the scheme. So releasing the battery swapping policy and the battery swapping standard doesn't mean that you cannot do some other form factors. Only thing is these things will be the one which will receive the scheme benefits and other things. It doesn't mean that you cannot sell it. You cannot sell some other form factors and other things. And the same thing happened with the FAME also, right? Before the FAME was released, and when the people were preparing for the FAME and other things, there were developments which were there, right? Phased manufacturing program wasn't there. There was a certain level of localization. So people didn't stop their localization. People didn't stop their businesses just because once the FAME would be launched and the type of phased manufacturing will be announced, they will do after that. Does that happen? It's an ongoing process, right? And the China has released their battery swapping standards. In fact, it has not yet been finalized. The draft only has been released last year. And for so long, they are doing this work.
So he's just, Nikhil Bhatia has just requested if you could talk. I'll just put him online. It'll probably take a second.
Sure.
I'm just allowing him. He's right here.
Hi, sir. How are you doing? Hi, Gautam.
I'm good, Nikhil. How are you?
All good. I was supposed to drop you an email, but I missed out because I'm traveling right now. Hope I'll try to patch up with you very soon. So very quickly, sir, it's not that we have stopped anything, right? We already had, because we knew FAME is going to end somehow, right? We cannot be, as a OEM, we cannot be dependent on that FAME only business model. So we have done, we have already introduced two products which are complying to the FAME policy. And then now we are in stage 2 of the development cycle where we are working on swappable architectures so that eventually we can bring the cost to a parity. Right, and because this 3-month period, it was so crucial for us that we are right now in limbo. That okay, should we decide stay, stop, halt? What we need to do, because target was to introduce these products before Diwali. So that's where I'm coming from.
So Nikhil, we are working relentlessly to do this as soon as possible. You know how much time it takes to release a standard in. Forget it. Let's forget India. Let's talk about the Europe and the Japan. So Japan is going to release the battery swapping standards by 2024. And they're preparing these standards since last year. In fact, I should say from the 2020, 4 years they are taking. How much Europe is taking? They will release at the end of 2023. They are preparing these standards since 2019. But we are going to release these standards within next 4 to 5 months. You know how relentlessly not only the government, BIS, even, but I should say industry is working with us. All of these standards, discussions, hard work, all these things are being done by the industry. In fact, I should name Prabjot. She is working relentlessly with us from the SME to solutions to define whatever is being visioned with us. So we are trying our best to do this as soon as possible. But of course, all these things has to be pragmatic. The solutions has to be tried and tested. Manufacturability of things should be there. It shouldn't happen that we release the connector and we say that the manufacturability is not possible in India, or the availability is not there, or the IP address is not available. All of these things has to be tested in Indian conditions, right? So that minimum period is required. But we are doing our best to release it as soon as possible. So definitely, and of course, the time has to be given to comply with all these things, which would be given for sure. It's not that the change is not going to be instantaneous. It can never be instantaneous. And more of your suggestions are further welcome.
So sorry, Nikhil, we are actually short of time. So we move on to the next question, and we just want to use as much as time as possible of Singh. There's a question from Aayog. He's asked, there are different kinds of batteries which are cylindrical, prismatic, and pouch. How will the standards integrate or take this into account?
No, I already said this thing that when we are going to, let's take two things. One thing is about the standardization. Second is about the technicalities and the performance. So within that also performance and the safety. So in terms of the standardization and interoperability, at cell level, we are not going to touch. That's why I specified at cell level, we are not going to touch. Prismatic or cylindrical or pouch, whatever cell, whatever form factor of the cell you are using, it's perfectly fine. You have to just pack it in the dimensions which we are going to define, because finally that is going to be used. In terms of the safety parameters and the performance, already 16 plus, in fact 17 standards has been released. So you can look at the BIS standards which has been released, and others will also be released in the due course of time. In fact, they are already either at the final stage or still at the discussion stage. The different stages we are. So those will also be released soon. So if you're talking about in terms of the safety parameters and others for different types of cells, then that is where we are as of now. And for in fact, I think prismatic and the cylindrical already some standards has been released, performance as well as the safety.
Thank you. Move on to the next question. So in addition to the electric vehicle, electric entities, to what extent are the oil companies involved in the charging of electric batteries, as they have the infrastructure spread across the country?
I'm not sure whether if you, I mean, all of you must have heard the news that 22,000 charging points would be set up by the oil marketing companies, OMCs, all across India. But now, there is a changed scenario. Battery swap policy is going to be released, and the battery swap station, the time of exchanging the batteries and the time of refueling the vehicle almost matches. You don't have that much space availability at the fueling stations, even if you set up the charging points. So I think the battery swap stations makes a good case for setting up these stations in the in retail bunks. So definitely this is something which can be explored. Nevertheless, the charging points, 22,000 charging points, which would be set up by the OMCs, has already been declared, the details of which are awaited.
Thank you, sir. So I know we're a little short of time. I'll just quickly ask one more question, and nevertheless, other questions which have not been addressed, I would request Mr. Singh, if you just share his answers over mail, and I'll share the same with everyone else. This is one question which Mr. Rajesh Singh has asked, and he's really wanting to know. He's asking, when is this ACC PLI scheme going to be announced?
Sorry, which PLI scheme?
The ACC PLI scheme.
No, ACC PLI scheme is already out. Last year it was out. The bids were submitted to us. The 14th of January was the last date. We have already received. It's in public domain. In fact, technical bids has also been opened. We received the 10 bids. The PIB release is there. If you want, you just search the ACC PIB release for the bids. So it's already open. The technical bid evaluation is right now going on, and soon we will open the financial bids. 80% of the total, scoring mechanism. Within the scoring mechanism, 80% was given to the technical part and the 20% for the financial part. Bids are already open. I mean, technical part has already been opened.
Sorry, sir. I think I'll definitely let Mr. Thano as well. And again, thank you very much for your time. Such an insightful and engaging session, and a privilege to hear you. Our guests and I have been hooked on to the very end, and I've taken home several nuggets. And thank you to our leaders as well in the audience for joining us and for staying till the very end and for sharing excellent questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So what's up? Bye-bye.